and just begin first by welcoming everyone. Steph is here. Steph, Yost fell at Eel Valley after the course on Monday and is in a cast, so she's not here with us, walking cast, so she's not here with us today. So how we do this is we take 5 minutes with Pali. You give an invocation, and then we go into a 5-minute silent meditation, and then Pali gives a talk, and I've asked her to give a talk on fear, because we're going into this, for those of you in the Monday class, we're going into the fear center, the spleen. So this will be juicing the field for that exploration. And then we'll open up to Q&A. If anybody wants to do the 6 steps, we'd love to have you do the 6 steps with Pali. And for those of you who are here, there's new people you might see who were in the Monday class, so they're joining us in this exploration. All right, it's all yours.
All right. So as we close our eyes, we come into that inner space. And there is the brightness of our true nature, which is awake awareness. And so coming home, we close our eyes, falling into love, into that spacious awake awareness, which is our true nature, and in which all realities arise. Allowing yourself to come home, to come to your center, to relax into your own heart. And in that space, we all experience this space exactly the same, as peacefulness, as freedom, as ease, as happy. And so it is. There was a really great book published back, I think. When was Jim Polsky's book published in the late 80s? Anybody here or online can feel free to correct me if I get facts wrong. They're not my best area of expertise. But I found Jampolsky's book pretty soon after I had come in touch with A Course in Miracles, which I came in touch with that in 1978, and it had just been out for 2 years. I was so excited about it. I got my subscription to Psychology Today, and the cover story was The Gospel According to Helen. And the entire main featured article in Psychology Today that month of October 1978 or maybe 80 sometime, was all about A Course in Miracles and the impact it was having and the attention it was getting. And I was so excited about it. I was living in the Midwest at the time. I called out to Tiburon, California, not having any clue or any concern about time zones. And so I woke Judith Stutch up and told her I wanted to order the books. There were 3 then. I wanted to order the books, and she said, "It's too early, call later." And so I did call later, and I started my study of A Course in Miracles at that point. And then over the next 3 or 4 years, taught it at Unity Church and in small groups. But the correlation with the Course and with the fear-based spleen center that will be our topic on Monday. Yeah, the correlation is that Jampolsky's book was entitled Love is Letting Go of Fear. And so we came into a different understanding of the nature of polarity between love, not hate, but fear. And that is the fundamental polarity that, in a way, we could say got installed with the fall, which is what we talked about on Monday, the garden story, the falling out of our hearts, out of our true nature, our awake awareness, and into our minds, and being caught there, everything began to look like equations. It began to look like cause and effect. It began to, in fact, be experienced as polarity. The fundamental polarity of love and fear rules this reality. And the most dominant one is fear. And the fear motivates everything from the body-mind, which is inclined to be alert through its adrenal systems, through its nervous system, being alert to what brings up fear. In the experience of incarnation, we bring in the polarity, which was our, shall I say, gift from the fall. It's what the remainders of that experience imposed, installed with all incarnating beings, was this polarity between love and fear. The fear part is the part that keeps us at a low frequency. It also keeps us externally referenced. And so we become alert to what's going on out here. And because the concern is that we may be at risk. And the opening into coming home to our true nature as awareness is what relieves us of that fundamental experience of being at risk, of being held in fear. The reality of what we experience upon the incarnation, and this is just a way of talking about it. Many people have a lot of different ideas and theories and stories about the incarnational cycle, about life between lives, and making choices about what this next incarnation might be. But until we wake up here in this incarnation, which means fundamentally that we come home to ourselves. And in that return home, what happens is that the fear frequency is no longer running the show. Until we have come home to our true nature, which is awake awareness, then we will be limited, we will be informed, we will be held back by concern, by fear. And that, as the polarity between love and fear, is the polarity of the fall, which we were talking about on Monday. The idea that I am at risk is something here that doesn't feel good to me, that puts us on alert. That is the function, in my understanding of human design, of the spleen centers. It's the kind of animal, primary, fear-based information center, we might say. Robin will explain that part of it much more clearly than I can, but the experience of being caught in fear was what occurred when we disobeyed, in quotes, God, and decided to eat of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. Good and evil, love and fear is the polarity that we then, having partaken of, are caught by. And so we're energetically held in that polarity. The way that it shows up in our consideration is that we will go from one end of the stick to the other. But no matter what was occurring, no matter how free of fear we might be experiencing, the shadow of the polarity is at work underneath there. And so this awakening that we talk about is the awakening out of that polarity. And in that perspective of not being held in fear, then we start to have the fullness of the creation, of the experience of our true nature, which is love. So the awake awareness, my true nature, I am that. That's the return to the garden. That's the return to connection instead of separation. The connection to true nature is also the connection to the reality. It's the connection to the garden again, to each other. Because what separated us was that movement from awareness into the mind. And that was the fear frequency that began to permeate this reality. And partaking of that through an incarnation, we've come to where we are now, where the polarities, need I say, are extreme. It's like, no need to point that out.
So Polly, when you look around and you see us,
Mm-hmm.
do you see people like in fear? What do you see in terms of fear? How do you?
Right. Well, most of the time, the way it shows up for me in working with anybody or with groups is concern, and concern about, sometimes it's about others, right? That was my particular version of it. I was concerned about my sister and my son. But the fear comes up and the need for control. The need for control is always underpinned by fear. And that's what we felt we lacked when we incarnated into a reality where the polarity was at play. Because we will be motivated to try to get the good end of the stick, the peaceful, the happy, the love. While all the time we've picked up the stick, the other end has an inevitability to it. And that's what we've all mostly found in our lives. So when I'm working with anybody, it's to what we are looking for is where is it that you're caught? And often it's subconscious. Where are you caught in a belief about the world and or about yourself that is based in fear? And fear has, of course, a great range. Everything from concern or nervousness to outright terror. So that was, yeah.
So you don't experience any fear?
No, I can experience fear from the animal perspective because this body, mind, and all of our incarnating vehicles carry the animal. Like if, for me, as everybody who knows that I have a vision issue, and I use a cane, and I move around this reality very tentatively because I don't want to fall. If I were to start to fall, I think I would experience the adrenaline of the fear. Yeah. So the body mind has its own kind of function, its own relationship with fear or stress even. But as our mind clears and we move out of our mind and into our sense of the awareness of our true nature, knowing ourselves as the space in which reality arises, we move beyond the polarity. And so it's not running the show anymore.
So can you talk about that moment where it was a moment that shifted? You talk about dropping the fear-based person.
Right. I'll have a sip of water, then I'll talk about that. The minute that the me drops, the me was created early on when you made the early conclusion, I didn't do it right, I'm not good enough, there's something wrong with me. All of those things that we point to as childhood wounds. What got created with that experience and that conclusion was an idea about being a person, a me. And so the me has been running the show ever since. The me is energetically configured by that experience, out of which the conclusion, I don't matter, I'm not good enough, was derived. So as the me is what carries the fear. We are afraid for this person that got created early on when we believed that we were not good enough or that we didn't matter. So when the me falls away, and the me falls away as you experience, and most everybody who is this interested in hanging out with me and Robin, most everybody's had some experience of transcendence, a sense of, I mean, I was just listening to somebody on some podcast talk about the experience she had when she was like a teenager, where she was just sitting under a blossoming fruit tree and she just looked up and she became it. You know, most all of us had those early experiences where we felt the transcendent nature of reality and our connection to it. And so, but the me that got created out of the conclusion, I'm not good enough, that one is underpinned by fear. And that me is the one that is created by the lens that we see reality through. So that me is seeing as an Anais Nen, yeah, says we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. And that I am not good enough creates a distortion field. And so as I see and look out through that distortion field, I will see it as confirming what I've installed, which is I'm not good enough, I don't matter. So I see the world as to some degree a threat, and this engages the fear response over a range of experience, right? Everything from feeling a little uncomfortable in a new group of people, all the way to being in terror if you think somebody's breaking into your house. So there's a whole range there, but it's in this body identification, which is the fundamental experience that installs the distortion field of the child. The me is the me conclusion, I'm not good enough, that got installed, that this body mind identifies with, sees through that distortion field that was created by that conclusion, and then sees a world that's threatening or that maybe not at what I want to experience, but it's to see that distortion field. When that distortion field, and that's the work we do with the 6 steps to freedom process, we we are looking to find the early conclusion and to dispel what was concluded in some cases by a 10-month-old baby or a 2-year-old child. So when we do this work with the 6 steps to freedom process, we're looking to clear the lens of perception that creates and engages the ego, the me, the ego mind identity. And then that's the frequency of fear, right? We're back to the garden now. That's the frequency of fear. And now we are caught. And so the awakening has to do with the light coming on so that you see through the lens clearly. No more distortion. The distortion again was created by the conclusion. But so that when the me falls away, all judgment falls away. All judgment is self-judgment. And so when we do this work of clearing that lens, we move into a world that we experience as being connected to, rather than being separate from. And that separation creates concern or the need to control or whatever. And so that is the awakening experience.
So that, I know there's so many people here, so that's the picture of it.
Yeah.
In the concrete with you and your life, can you just share in a very concrete way how that worked for you with your sister and your son?
Right. Well, this is the story of Pali's awakening. Yawn. But at the heart of that awakening was what was still motivating the experience for this body mind and the me that out of which created that. And this body mind was 70 years old at the time. What it found was that it had caught itself in difficulty, what we would call suffering. And I had done the course with Byron Katie some 6-7 years before that. And I heard in the middle of all of this conflagration of family, property, and money, I heard a voice say, if you're suffering, and it was Katie's voice, if you're suffering, you're believing something that's not true. And that was like this light came on, and all of a sudden I went into my own meditation space, sat with that. What would that be? What am I believing that's creating all of this suffering? And I saw clearly I was believing that somebody else's well-being depended on me, and that could never be true, that was a distortion in the field of reality, that when it was installed, created suffering. So it was a kind of unexpected outcome. It didn't include a Kundalini awakening. I'd had that 10 years before. But it included a clarity in mind that took away the idea that any one of us is here. We're here first to do our own clearing, to be right here, true north on our own behalf. And from that place, we can connect to everyone else who lives at that same frequency. So I don't know if that's enough of the story, Rob.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have had things that occur, and sometimes it's in a conflagration of sorts. It's in a kind of kertuffle, we might call it. I think that's not a word. I think I made it up. But it's like something is going on, and then it's like clear. It's like a light comes on. That little light they used to do in cartoons when somebody got an idea, right? The little light comes on, and I could see clearly that the distortion field, what remained of the distortion field for this body mind was caught with that, I call it the lie of codependency. It was caught in that energy field, in that error. It was a frequency of fear, but my fear was not recognized because I had projected it onto them. So I wasn't feeling it here, right? So we often slip by because of our idea that it's about an other. It's about somebody else, a child, a parent, a sibling, a friend, whatever. But it always comes back to right here, right now. And the clearing of the distortion field was that brilliant understanding of that I am here on behalf of this one, and from that place, this taken care of, I will be a benefit and a blessing to all of reality. If you haven't done it here, it's kind of like the oxygen mask in the airplane, right? You put yours on first before you have the child or the elderly. I love that category now. You put your mask on first, and then you're prepared. And so each one of us comes into this alignment of our true nature, of our self-regard, of being on our own behalf. And from that place, we are available because we are no longer in fear, right? We are present. And that's a shift in frequency out of fear and into love. And because our self-judgment has fallen away, there's no longer any judgment towards others or circumstances in the apparent external.
So would it be okay if I share a little bit of the backstory to fill in just to make it concrete?
Sure.
So Polly and her mother and her father wanted another kid.
Right.
They desperately wanted another
I was a
child.
little cancer baby girl who just wanted a baby sister or brother.
And it took 9 years, 8 years before they had this sister. She had a sister born, and everything organized around, everybody's love organized around the sister.
Right. Mine especially.
Hers especially. And
Totally.
so she was responsible for her sister until she was 70 years old. I mean, two extremes.
And I chose that. It wasn't anybody else's imposition. It was like my heart, my connection was out. And yeah.
Right. And meanwhile, your son,
Right.
your youngest son,
By my second marriage,
father committed suicide. And Polly felt.
I felt that it was just his older brothers, my oldest two sons were away, living with their father. And I felt this collapse into my connection with my son. And in that collapse, it was like, and it would not be apparent to other people looking at the family dynamics from the external, because some of us are smart enough to make things look better than they really are, right? So it was like I was taking up everything on his behalf, even when it looked like it was for me. It was so the distortion field centered around the two of them and my commitment to their well-being. And I wouldn't see my sister for years sometimes, but if she called, I dropped everything to do whatever I felt she needed.
Right. And then the episode with Dallas without the sex.
Yeah. I'm being so outed here. This is great. Yeah, my sister and I, we took care of our father as he was passing at 93 and 2010. And with his passing, we received some inheritance, and we decided to invest together in Oregon on a cannabis farm with my youngest son. And what happened was everybody was in great agreement about the investment, about the property, about the harvest, about everything. And the night before the harvest, it was all stolen. I call it the episode of Dallas without the sex. It's all about family and problems and money and crops. And so with that was when I went into what I described earlier as my absolute suffering, because here, these two ones that I had basically, they were primary in my life, and they were both in guilt and fear and suffering themselves. And there was nothing I could do about it. And that's when the light came on, that it was not mine. It's yeah. And then the love that arose was letting go of the fear of the outcome and the trust in authenticity, the trust in true nature for myself here. And from that place, everything began to open up. One of the things that falls away with the early wounding is authenticity, because early on, when we are part of a family and we think that when, say that daddy comes home and he's unkind to mom, maybe he's been drinking, and I find out that if I'm sort of fun and entertaining, then that doesn't go south so much. Then I will begin to inauthentically be charming and entertaining and whatever else I think will work. So when we are early on in situations where there is a fear component, we will begin to use our gifts and our talents on behalf of trying to avoid something out here. So that was what had happened with me, but it had a different appearance to it because it looked as if I was being really good. A good mom, a good big sister, a good person, right? But what was being neglected was this true north on this, which is if we don't do that first, then nothing else will land in the way that carries the highest frequency of love instead of fear. Making sense?
Anyone have any questions? Stephanie had a question here. She said, can anyone please repeat the belief she had in her words?
Yeah, I believed that my sister and my son's well-being depended on me. And that's a fundamental error. It's never true. One of the reasons that we come about it so readily and is such a prevalent kind of distortion field is because we are early on dependent. So our well-being depends on mom and dad or maybe siblings. And then the next part of that is we are trained to be here on behalf of others. The idea that we are here to serve, the distortion field it's not acknowledged that it creates this distortion field. But when we are external to ourselves, there's nobody home here because my attention particles are out, then what happens is that this is a low frequency. The first recipient of our frequency is our body. The body takes the hit. And so whatever our adaptive behaviors or our ways in which we are apparently serving others, being good, being bodhisattva, in all of those ways, if this hasn't been handled perfectly, truly, right here, right now, not perfectly in the perfection way, but perfectly in the geometry way of attention particles back here, right? What happens with our attention with the early wounding is that the attention particles go out. And now we're left bereft of what's required to be present on our own behalf. True North, present here. From this place, we can easily connect, and we will easily connect, because being back with ourselves depends on us dropping our self-judgment. This has some intricacies to it in a certain way, but at the level of the heart, there aren't any intricacies. It's that feeling you have, like I was talking about the young girl who felt one with the blossoming fruit tree. It's this feeling that we may have it on the beach, down at the ocean, with a friend, without any conditions that would look like it would be necessary to create it. Because it is who we are already, that. I am that. Knowing ourselves as that is the direction. That's the compass for waking up. You have to reclaim your attention from out here, come back to oneself, and from this place, you will be a benefit to your world, whoever that involves.
So, Polly, there's a question from Eloisa. How did your awakening affect your sister and your son?
Well, it was dramatic. We don't call it an episode of, it could have been an episode of Dynasty without the sex. But my son and I became closer because I was more authentically connected to him. And my sister and I became estranged because she was in so much fear. And there was no longer motivation here to do anything about that. I'm not in close contact with her. I trust that her life is exactly the way she wants it to be at this point. So the answer to that is the connection between me and my son became more authentic and more legitimately connected. There was no tilting towards him from me. And that with my sister, it's been estranged since then.
Any other questions, or anyone want to do the work with Polly? Any fears, triggers that are up? I will say one thing that I've watched Polly, like when your grandson was in his car accident, or your granddaughter has to have, you know, heart surgery. Like there's no fear. She just doesn't go to fear. It's very interesting to watch.
Yeah, the larger reality is what you come into experiencing once the me, which is created out of fear, falls away. So once your ego identity is no longer running the show, then you are in a position to feel the sacredness, the fullness, the nature of reality as the truth of what it is, which is love and connection and fun and happening and everything that we want to experience. We are already that. And as we allow that to be our experience, the world that we center reflects it. The larger world awaits us shifting in frequency. We're responsible for this collective reality in exactly this way. If we continue to carry the frequency of fear, then we're contributing to the polarization and to the conflict that we see that's so prevalent. As we come home and clear our frequency, our true nature, who I am, is already what's true. So it's a matter of subtraction. It's a matter of letting go of anything that's not connection, not love. And as that falls away, you are there, pristine, awake, aware, and present in this eternality of the present moment. So everything shifts as we clear our frequency. And the frequency that is carried mostly is that one of polarity.
So there's 3 people who have questions. Are you
Sure.
good to go there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we'll start with Lindsay.
Thank you. So my question, I guess, is obviously so I'm just thinking about codependency, movement of it from being the rule of it into the wisdom of it, I guess, because obviously if you have an infant, they're dependent upon you, and you obviously have a responsibility. As then your infants become toddlers, then into teenagers, and their independence moves into their own self. It's like, I guess kind of talk about that crux of codependency, of where that need turns into toxicity, I guess. Does that make sense?
Turns into what?
Well, toxicity, or when
Got it. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
simply due to age and maturity.
Exactly. Right. And I do think that one of the reasons we incarnate through this early dependency cycle has to do with the fall, basically. That in the garden, I don't think there was any dependency or codependency. I think there was the joyful celebration of aliveness going on. I believe that collectively, this particular reality, carrying the frequency of fear that it does, is what creates this cycle of dependency, right? And because the cycle of dependency is a kind of a setup for what you're pointing to, Lindsay, it's kind of the setup for codependency, right? So it's the trick is to see that everybody is fully present and capable. And I mean, the connection that you have with your children is a great example of how you're parenting them without codependency.
So Polly, if there's an infant, what she's pointing to is there's an infant, I think you're not saying that's codependency, that's doing what's in
No,
front
that-
of you to do.
Right, that's the nature of this incarnational cycle here. You're taking care of it. You do, and you do it in love and connection. And I think that one of the reasons that, I mean, it's kind of like, this is a gift to human beings so that they get a chance to grow up and maybe clear a field of fear that they're responsible for, whether it's you or the child or the infant. So it's like, as we go through that, to be, if you're not caught in fear yourself, then your interaction with the child, or the way it is with my grandchildren now, is very straightforward and authentic, and without the overlay of the idea that they are dependent or are in trouble, or that they are at risk. That I live with them the same way I do with myself, which is in this larger reality where there's nothing wrong. It's just what's happening. I don't know if that answered.
Yeah, that helped. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lindsay. I think, let me see who's next. Yeah, Steph is next.
Thank you so much. This is perfect timing. I have been aware of codependency from my mother to me.
Mm.
I have a 24-year-old daughter, and I raised her. This is like Lindsay, I feel like I'm just like stepping on the end of your question, because I raised her with attachment parenting.
Mm.
It was very important to me, but aware of codependency.
Mm-hmm.
In the last month and a half, I have been going through some of the hardest parenting times of my life, because I found out my daughter is literally at risk with an abusive ex that I didn't know she was still with, that has now gone to prison and is out on bail.
Mm-hmm.
And she doesn't live with me yet. She doesn't live here yet, but I've been all of this codependency. I've been working. And then I found out on top of it that she's contracted her father's alcoholism, my ex-husband.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of a sudden in the last month and a half, all this absolute at risk in my mother brain and body is going off.
Yeah.
And I'm learning. I've gone my first Al-Anon, which I should have done when my ex-husband was drinking, which is why I left him 12 years ago. But I went to my first Al-Anon appointment or meeting because of her.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm like, this is too important to me. She's everything, she's everything to me. Right. So I'm so aware of the codependency, and I'm working it actively, but she truly is at risk. So my question is, what comes up when I say all that? Because there is a line, like on Lindsay's question, it's like, when I was back before I awakened to her alcoholism or substance abuse or dependency a few weeks ago, I was back with her, living with her, trying to do super mom and thinking I was going to fix everything before I saw this. And I literally wanted to Google, how do you ground a 24-year-old, or can you ground a 24-year-old?
Right.
Because I was like, if I could just keep her home, she's going to be okay. Okay.
Right.
So that's where I'm at. And that I can feel like, and I've done a lot to distance from her health. And she
Mhm.
was the good girl growing up. She's perfect.
Right.
And now all of a sudden all this is, and I'm excited for her, because she's going to find herself, but I'm also truly terrified
Mhm.
of her safety and
Right.
her well-being.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah,
line.
that's a big one. Yeah. The meta to all, we'll start with the very last thing you said, which is, and this is a really high bar, about we are all eternally safe. And I know that has no place to land in your mother's heart right now. Oh, but we can, and I come by this righteously. I had a son who committed suicide. He was bipolar, He was an addict. He was everything that you just described. And it was like there is such a bigger picture, and we are, and your blessing of having this daughter that you have, and in your willingness to step up to the plate with the Al-Anon of whatever that system is, that you come into your own clarity on your own behalf, and that's the greatest gift you'll ever give her. In the meantime, your interaction with her has to be the truth from what it works best for you. It can't be based in what you think she needs, because you don't know. The only thing we have that is that's accurate is what's true for us, telling ourselves the truth about it. And it may be skewed, it may be distorted a little bit because there may not be awakeness yet, but that's the most important thing. From that place, then you decide, it's again, you're putting your own oxygen mask on, and then you're reaching out to her and any way that she receives it. But the test for you, Stephanie, is going to be your own authentic, getting in touch with yourself, telling yourself the truth, and not going beyond where you are funded yourself. It will not serve her. And I know I know how bad it can look. I've been there. I do know. But there's a way in which there's a much larger picture. And it's in this knowing about the nature of reality as eternally safe. And I wouldn't feel authentically available for sharing that if I hadn't had the experience in this lifetime of having a son that committed suicide, who was an addict, who had been on all the things that you're talking about. But there is a bigger picture. I've been in touch with him, not recently, but in the first 10 years after he passed. And this reality, we have it so nailed down that this is it. This is what's happening here today with her, with him, with this. That's not even close to the whole picture. But be present right here on your own behalf and tell her the truth. Tell her the truth about your broken heart and what you want for her, and that whenever you do know it authentically, that the best thing you can do for her is to do the clearing within yourself.
So
I do know this, and I believe it so strongly, and hearing you is showing me even more of, I work with people around this. I have such truth. My whole work for the last 20 years has been based in this, that one woman telling the truth about her life will split the world open.
Exactly.
And
right.
I am being gifted this, and it is the biggest threshold I've had to cross thus far, for sure.
Absolutely.
But I am telling her that I'm giving her, thank you. What I'm seeing is that this is even more of what I've needed to be able to stand in my integrity. I've always known and trusted that what you're saying is true.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one more threshold that I've crossed, one more crucible that I'm going through, that I'm going to be able to say, like you're saying, to the people who want to hear it.
Yeah.
This is the truth.
So Polly, would you recommend the 6 steps here?
What is your sense of being triggered by the situation, Stephanie?
When I feel as if she's still in the system, she's still in the town where the danger of the ex-boyfriend lives, and she's living next to my ex-husband with the active addiction. So I feel like my trigger is her not being able to be in her body enough, in her heart enough to make a decision to pull out, to be able to do anything with her free will.
Yeah, let's do the 6 steps with this, with your I'm triggered, and that with what you just described to me.
Okay.
The fear that you have with all of those circumstances, how that's coming together, that creates such concern for you. I'm triggered.
Yeah.
The second step is it's about me. Does that land for you?
That the trigger's about me?
Yeah,
Up here it does.
good. That's this place to start. That's where we usually hang out. Yeah. Yeah, that it's the third step is the feeling that you're having. I could feel a lot of it, but just to name the feeling state that this trigger creates in you, the feeling.
Anxiety, out of control. It's very like desperate,
Desperate. Yeah,
desperation,
right.
incompetence.
Yeah. Mhm. Okay. Using those feelings,
Vulnerability, huge vulnerability.
yeah, very vulnerable. Using that constellation of the feelings, it's like all the different facets of that feeling constellation. And pre-associate, what's the earliest time you can remember feeling that same way?
Crib.
What was going on?
A lot energetically and emotionally around me.
Mhm.
A mother who was denying her true nature, her true needs and will, and who she is, and a father really oppressive, just black or white thinker.
Mhm.
Scared young, both of them scared young people. So a lot of disorganization in my system, in my
Mhm.
environment, and a lot of holy shit, I'm not
Yeah,
safe here with these two.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. So when that was going on and you were in the crib and that was the field that you were in, you believed it meant something about you. What did you conclude that it meant about
I
you?
don't matter.
Yeah. So that's what got installed, right? That's what got installed. And now the last step in the 6 steps to freedom process is the bright light of awareness. You and I and all of the people on the call are shining the light of awareness on that conclusion. I don't matter. And the light of awareness shining on something that's not true is like shining sunlight on mold. See what happened right then, right there, with that little Stephanie in that crib with that turmoil going on all around her. And she had nothing, there was nothing for her to conclude except that clearly she didn't matter. So we understand the validity of that, but the difficulty with it is it got installed. And from that subconscious repression of that, it gets projected. So I forgive myself for ever having believed I don't matter. Can you see that?
Mhm.
Can you see I don't matter was an unavoidable creation out of those conditions for that little girl? That little
Definitely.
infant. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. It's a
And
good
the
one.
light of awareness is the light of awareness is that's the alchemy. That's the alchemy of dissolving that installation. That installation has created some aspect or another of your reality ever since. Even when it's being repressed or denied, it's active. It's an active participant in your reality. If you can see it, if you can feel it, we've brought it into the light now, and it can be dispelled.
I appreciate
Thank you, sweetheart.
it. Yes, you can.
And you can use the 6 steps whenever it comes up. We because we think that the magic thing should work better than our ordinary lives do. We think, well, I did that once. Well, I've been living this for more than one lifetime, so it's just arising. It's like, being triggered. I always say being triggered is like gold, right? It's going to give you access to what's been running the show that you haven't had any access to. We think it's that other people need to straighten up so that we can feel better about things, but that ain't where cause is.
That's right. That's right.
Thank you so much,
Oh,
sweetheart.
Polly, thank you so much.
So much.
Thank you, Steph.
Thank you.
So we're just about the bottom of the hour. Linda has her hand up, so I just want to touch into Linda. She's in
Mhm.
Asheville.
Mhm.
we just want to hear Linda, yeah, anything you want to say before we go off, Linda?
Hi, Polly.
Hi,
Um,
sweetheart.
actually, the piece that you just did with Steph was really helpful for me because I've been doing well, and today I got a little triggered. We're moving into the end of week 2, and no power, like it could be a while. And it's mostly, yeah, I'm just feeling tonight the tiredness, and I see the fear came up around, maybe this will never end.
Right.
And I'm actually doing really well, and I'm very fortunate. But yeah.
Yeah, the ability to be with exactly what is
Mhm.
includes the external conditions, and that's where the weariness can come in. But being with what is who you're being to yourself, in that kind of open, soft, allowing space of kindness to yourself in conditions that are like catastrophes or difficulties. It's really imperative that we do a deep level of self-care,
Yeah.
being on our own behalf, of being kind and present and experiencing. It's a good chance for a lot of meditation, I suspect, huh?
Well, actually, everything takes 4 times longer. So just, getting water to flush the toilets and washing my face
Right.
can take like half an hour. So
Right.
it's not a lot of sitting around. And then attending to, damaged trees. But there's also the possibility of being in this meditative inner, just open awareness place in the midst of all the actions that I take.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, you've got it. That is the high bar, and that's the key. That's the
Yeah.
frequency you want to offer into the difficulty.
And when I do, it feels marvelous. And I'll do a little more inquiry tonight about, how did I let myself get hit today a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah. Yeah, it's quite an experience. I think
Oh yeah.
yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you, Linda. All right.